In today's show, the Blazers roster is finalized. Welcome to the Ish Wainright era. Also, welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen. Coming at you Monday through Friday, each and every weekday. So make it a part of your daily routine and tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, the Blazers roster has been finalized. We'll talk about the final 14-man group, plus the three-ways, introduces a new player, Ish Wainright, and some season previews for the last folks we haven't touched on the roster, Moses Brown and Rayan Rupert. Fun show, getting you ready for the regular season, which begins this week. We got a bunch of fun shows for you heading into the week. We'll have bold predictions. We'll have a preview of the crossover preview of the Clippers season opener. Talk about a basketball game when it happens. The NBA season is here, so if you're new to Locked On Blazers, tap in. And if you're a longtime listener, this is a great time to tell your friends to get on board. Let's go with the news first, though. The Blazers roster, it's not officially official as I'm recording this on Sunday afternoon, early afternoon on Sunday. The Blazers have not announced all of their roster moves, but through some reporting from Shams Charania of The Athletic and Sean Hyken of Rose Garden Report, we know what the final roster is going to look like. Here's what you need to know. The Blazers are going to waive Duop Reith. They're going to waive Kevin Knox. Their final two roster decisions to make. That means Moses Brown makes the roster. He had guaranteed money for signing. He had a little guaranteed money for making the regular season roster. Follow the money is usually the best guess here. He was the only minimum guy who got even a small guarantee. Moses Brown makes the roster. We'll talk about him to end the show. Kevin Knox was the other, he did media day, and so really they brought him out for media day, maybe just a screw up by the Blazers press relations team or whatever, what have you. But Knox ends up being one of the last cuts. I don't think it's a huge surprise that Reith was cut. He was probably better than Brown in preseason, but he wasn't like super, super good from my view. And he's just a little bit older. If you're choosing for a third center, the upside guy, 4 years younger and Moses Brown and a little bit bigger, the Blazers are in like sort of upside territory. We'll see what happens with Reith, whether he joins the G League. That would be somewhat of a surprise to me, but if you want to chase the NBA dream, that's pretty close to chasing the NBA dream, is sticking around a team's G League program, and certainly that could happen for him. But Knox, he was sort of on the fringes in preseason. They weren't playing with the sort of the regular group. He was getting in with kind of some even garbage time by preseason standards. He was clearly on the fringe of the roster, who's going to be the 14th guy to make it, but it seems like he was, except the Blazers chose to waive him in the end to sign Ish Wainright. Ish had played the last two seasons on two-way deals that had been converted to regular contracts for the Phoenix Suns. The Suns had just too many players. They had to waive somebody. A non-guaranteed deal for Wainright made him waivable for an expensive roster. There seems to be some reporting that the Suns thought he was going to come back once he passed through waivers and maybe get another two-way contract. He didn't. The Blazers claimed Wainright on waivers. In the second segment, I'll tell you everything you need to know about Wainright as we get to know the Blazers' newest player. But that's your 14-man group. The 6'6" forward, 29-year-old Wainright becomes number 14 along with Moses Brown. So your final roster heading into day one of the regular season. It has to be finalized, I believe, by October 23rd on Monday. You were listening to Monday, October 23rd show, so it probably will be official by the time you hear this, unless you're an early listener. I hope you're an early listener right when this one comes out. Final roster, though. Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons, Matisse Thybulle, Jeremy Grant, DeAndre Ayton, along with Malcolm Brogdon, Shaedon Sharpe, Robert Williams, Jabari Walker, Chris Murray, Toumani Camara, Moses Brown, Rayan Rupert, and Ish Wainright. Those are your 14. Blazers are going to carry an open roster spot in with them to camp. In with them into the regular season as they break camp, rather. The other news you need to know. The Blazers got a new two-way player, Justin Minaya, who was clearly getting real run in preseason, while the other two-way guys, John Butler Jr. and Ibubachi, did not get run. They gave Minaya a bunch of run. They let him play, and he is a disruptive defensive player, and he ends up getting the final two-way spot as the Blazers have waived John Butler Jr. The waiving of Reith and Knox and John Butler Jr. reported by Sean Hyken of Bleacher Report. The signing of Wainwright, claiming of Wainwright off waivers, first reported by Shams Charania of The Athletic. Credit where credit is due on that one. But Minaya gets the Blazers' last two-way spot. He joins Skylar Mays and Ibu Baji as the Blazers' 3 two-way players. Those are completely full. John Butler Jr., 7 foot, super skinny, small forward type. Interesting upside because he's huge and he can shoot, but I never saw him as he just seemed like a sort of a long-term project. The physicality and some other skills just weren't quite there for him. The athleticism, but really big and can shoot it is worth taking a flyer on. Minaya, though, has some more translatable skills. I don't know what he's going to be like on offense. I don't think he does much there just yet. I think he makes some haphazard drives. The shooting is not there yet. I don't know what he's going to be on offense, if he's ever going to be an NBA caliber player on offense. But he gets after it on defense. I mentioned that last year during the Super Tankathon when he was part of the Blazers on a couple 10-day deals, and as well as in summer league. It's he's competitive on defense. He's got long arms. He knows what he needs to do, and he plays his butt off on defense. And that is much closer. That his defensive intensity and defensive impact is much closer to a translatable skill. If you needed to steal 6 minutes, it'd be probably easier to steal 6 minutes with Minaya because he's going to get after on defense, kind of knows what he does. Interesting to see him as a two-way guy. I hope that we get to see him play a bunch with the remix and he can kind of figure out where he fits in offensively. He played in the G League last year as well. So I think a totally reasonable flyer. Two-way guys are just by virtue not NBA players. That's the whole point, is that they're on two-way contracts. And Minaya gets a chance to kind of develop and see what he can be. And the Blazers get the chance, with all two-way deals, to just take a flyer on young players without a bunch of NBA experience. And now that you have the G League there, you get a little incubator to actually make it work. So those are your 14, your 3 two-way spots. This is what the group looks like. None of this is earth-shattering, but I think Ish Wainright is fun because he's a new player. So let's get to know a new player. We'll talk Ish Wainright in the second segment, but before we do that, I want to tell you about Gametime. It's the number one place for last-minute tickets. Blazers play this week. They start their games, and say you are finding yourself wherever the Blazers might be, whether it's in Portland or on the road somewhere. Say you're in LA on ahead of Wednesday night's season opener, and you decide last minute you want to go to the game. You say, you know what? I'm off work. I got the money. I can afford it. Let's go. There's no better spot than Gametime. Why I like it is because they got all-in prices right there on the screen. So you open up the app, you look at the stadium, you're searching, you say, okay, I think I'm going to sit downstairs a little bit. With that price downstairs, $71, what you see is what you get. You're getting a great deal, no hidden fees. Two clicks later, you got the tickets right there in your email. They got tickets right up to tip-off. They got deals on tickets even hour after the game starts. So if you decide you want to go at halftime, check it out. They got flash deals. They got zone deals where you pick the zone and Gametime finds you a ticket and helps you save. Plus, if you find a better price in the same section, in the same row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app. Create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, you create an account, you use the redemption code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA, and you'll get $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right. Let's get to know Ish Wainright. The Blazers claimed Wainright off waivers. So basically how it happens is if you're under contract, team requests waivers on you, then you pass through the system. Then every team, if they want to, can place a bid and pick up that contract. If you pass through waivers, you become a free agent, which is much, much, much more common. I think the reporting around from Phoenix suggests that maybe the Suns were expecting Ish Wainright to pass through waivers, but instead the Blazers continued the strange Phoenix to Portland to Phoenix pipeline Drew Eubanks, Yusuf Nurkic, Nazir Little, all in Phoenix. DeAndre Ayton, Tumani Kamara, and now Ish Wainright, all in Portland. So let's get to know Ish Wainright. Here's what you need to know. Meet the newest Trailblazer. 29 years old. Appeared in 60 games for the Suns last year, including 2 starts, averaged 15.3 minutes per game, scored 4.2 points and 2.3 boards, shot 37% from the field, 32.9% from 3, and 83.8% from the free throw stripe. 76% of his shots were threes. My man lives beyond the 3-point line. That's where you're going to find him. Wainright is a little bit older, even though he is only entering his 3rd NBA season. Well, he spent 4 years in college at Baylor, and then his playing basketball. Then after his senior season, went back with a year of eligibility and played football for Baylor as a tight end, as a graduate student tight end. Caught 34 passes, caught a couple touchdowns, even went to NFL camp with the Buffalo Bills and got cut before the season started, and then started his professional basketball journey. So he spent 5 years in college and even kind of took a 4A plus a summer pursuing an NFL dream, a la Antonio Gates. Big dudes with big shoulders playing tight end in the NFL. Basketball guys. You've seen it before. But then he goes to play professionally in Germany. He goes to play professionally in France. And eventually his NBA career starts when he gets a 2-way deal into the 21-22 season with the Phoenix Suns. Played 2 years for the Suns, just over 100 games. Last year, career highs across the board in minutes, in games played, in points, and in rebounds. He played 50 games by the All-Star break last year, so he exhausted his 2-way deal. So the Suns converted him from a 2-way deal to a standard NBA contract. This is the type of thing that, like, players that can, when you get a 2-way guy who becomes part of the plan, and the Suns had some injuries and they needed sort of the physicality from Ish, and so that they convert him because he was going to be, he was playing with regularity as part of the rotation, and they convert him a 2-year deal. It had a trigger date for year 2. You could exercise that and it would still be non-guaranteed through January 10th. So like a very, very, very team-friendly contract. But again, converted from a 2-way to a natural NBA contract. Missed a little bit of missed preseason with a calf injury, and then the Suns had 17 players they had to cut down to 15, and Ish was one of the players they cut down. They request waivers. Blazers claim him on waivers. When you claim somebody, the Blazers also had to cut down to 15. They got to cut Kevin Knox. He ends up being the last one to go. It was like, this will be the sort of a mini preview. Usually we do how they got here. Blazers claim off waivers. What they did last year, we talked about that. His 60 games, 4 points, 2 boards, 33% 3-point shooting, but basically only takes threes. Best and worst case scenario, we'll do a sort of the super mini version of these previews. I think the best case scenario for Ish Wainright is that he finds himself in the back half of the forward rotation. The Blazers are somewhat thin at both forward spots, and there's opportunity there. And Wainwright's physicality, his defensive acumen, his intensity on that end, and his understanding of what he is. He's a 3-and-D guy. He hasn't been a great shooter. The best games he's had in the league, he's made 3-pointers, but he also gets, in his most impressive games, steals, block shots. He can guard both forward spots. Not super fast to guard 3s and not super big to guard 4s, but is capable of guarding both positions because he's 6'6" and huge and strong. He's just not he's not a crazy leaper, and he's not super fleet of foot. So he's like an undersized 4 is what his best position is. And the best case scenario is that physicality, that defense, and that intensity is valuable for the Blazers off the bench, and Ish Wainright carves himself out a position in the regular playing rotation as a bench forward, because the Blazers need someone who has, at 29 years old, has played 100 games for competitive Suns teams over the last 2 seasons and knows what it's like to play a specific role on a specific team, and he can fit in as a high-quality role player. The worst case scenario is that he just doesn't fit, and that the shooting at 33% from 3 just doesn't allow him to get a real minutes. And on a team that already is going to feature some non-shooters with DeAndre Ayton, even though he wants to shoot, but he's not much of a 3-point shooter, potentially Rob Williams playing that spot, with Scoot Henderson, who teams are going to dare to shoot, that having another non-shooter on the wing really makes it tough to play him with the regulars as a part of the playing rotation, and that Wainright just isn't a great fit. The worst case scenario is that he is exactly who he was signed to be, a fringe player who plays when folks are injured, but for the most part spends games watching because he is indeed the 13th or 14th man on the roster. Worthwhile flyer, right? Like best and worst case scenario is like he's going to find a bench role or he's not going to find a bench role. Worthy flyer for that kind of money. There's no real financial risk. There's no long-term commitment. If the Blazers think he can play, and again, he's played a regular role on a competitive basketball team, particularly last season, then you find someone who can kind of fit into the fringe of your rotation and be a positive contributor, and then you figure out what you want to do with him long term. Or on a team that might just need more physicality and more defense from those forward spots, you get that insurance with Wainright, who kind of just has proven what he can be in the NBA, even in a very short NBA career, mostly as a two-way guy, who in both his seasons as a two-way guy for the Suns got converted to a regular NBA deal in order to allow him to be a postseason contributor, although he was never a high-level one in either of those seasons. So, what are my expectations for Ish Wainright? You know, I don't think he's going to be part of the night one rotation. I think he's outside looking in for a good chunk of the season. And I think he's outside looking in for a good chunk of the season because this is exactly kind of why you sign semi-veterans to these type of deals. You say, hey, look, if he can help, let's go for it. If he can't help, this isn't someone who's going to rock the boat. He's not going to be upset. And we have not that much invested in him developmentally or financially either way. My assumption is that Ish Wainright is a bench guy for most of the year, and that when he does play, we will appreciate what he brings without being blown away. We being the Trailblazers viewing public. Ish was well liked in Phoenix. People like fan favorite, kind of just like a role player who understands it. I think if he got the opportunity, he would be a role player who understands what the role is. I'm just not with what the Blazers have with Jabari Walker and Tamati Kamara and Chris Murray. I would probably rather take a flyer on the young forwards than what Wainright brings. Like, he's 29, even if he's new to the NBA, relatively new, year 3. But like at 29, he is probably very close to a finally formed product. Now, if he shoots 38% from 3, totally different conversation. But if he is a below average 3-point shooter, then, give me Jabari Walker being a below average 3-point shooter and just figure it out from there on a team like the Blazers. But again, a low risk flyer that I think is worthwhile. Okay, how about a couple more previews? Our final previews of the season. We'll have all 14 regular roster guys previewed for you. After we wrap this up, talk Rayan, Rupert, and talk Moses Brown. 2 guys that look like they've got a lot to grow. We'll talk about where they can grow and where they can help in the third segment. Before we do that, let's talk about FanDuel. You want to get in on the NFL action? It's NFL Sunday as I'm recording this right now. And if you are a new customer to FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, all you got to do is place a $5 bet, and you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. Place that $5 bet, then regardless of what happens, $200 to play with. So if you think about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app's super easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, spreads, player props, over-unders, futures bets on anything you're looking for. So why not visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and hop into that NFL season. That's FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Still a pass, first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers. We're wrapping up our season previews as we head into the regular season. We talked Ish Wainright, everything you need to know about the newest Blazer. Now, we got 2 more guys left. That's what we're going to get through here to close the show. If you've missed any of these season previews, these are players 13 and 14 as we wrap this up. There's a playlist on YouTube, every single video previewing Every player on the regular season roster, plus a little Nazir, little bonus one before he got traded. But if you're an audio listener, they're in your feed. You can get caught up on everything. You get a couple days before the season starts. I think you could, if you really believe in yourself, you could listen to about 3 hours of preview content, get totally caught up. Good way to figure out kind of where I stand on the roster, where I stand with each and every player, and familiarize yourself as you get rolling. So let's do it. Let's start talking Rayan Rupert. The 43rd pick in the NBA draft joins the Blazers from the New Zealand Breakers, where he's averaged 6.8 points and 2.4 boards in 31 games, including 18 starts. He played 18.1 minutes a night. New Zealand has the NBL, National Basketball League, has the Blitz, which is like the sort of young showcase, and then they have the regular season. So those stats, 6.8 and 2.4, are across all competitions in the NBL last year for Rupert. He shot 36.9% from the floor, 31.3% from three, and 73.8% from the stripe. Joins the Blazers, 43rd pick. He was actually he was a green room invite, which usually indicates that people think you're going to go, in the first round, if not higher. Rupert actually had to wait around for nearly 4 hours before finally hearing his name called. The teenager heads to Portland. 43-year-old from Strasbourg, France. He's shows up in Summer League, and the immediate thing I said is, wow, he's bigger than I thought he would be. I thought he was like, when I watched the YouTube clips of him, like string bean, but he's filled out a defensive wing. He's just really young and really raw on offense, and I think we saw that in Summer League. Averaged 3.6 points, 3.6 rebounds, 1.2 assists, shot 25% from the floor, 0-5 from three, and 50% from the free throw line. Played 18.2 minutes a game across 5 games for the Blazers in Summer League. Struggled equally in preseason. I won't drag you through more preseason stats, but the point is that Rupert looks like someone with real defensive potential and a long, long way to go on offense. We'll talk more about that in the best and worst case scenarios. First, let's talk Moses Brown. The 24-year-old entering his amazingly 5th NBA season. Spent last season with the Clippers and then a very brief cameo, 2 10-day contracts with the Brooklyn Nets. Played 36 games, that's 34 for the Clippers, and then 2 appearances, 6 total minutes for the Nets across 2 10-day deals. Averaged 4.3 points, 3.9 boards, shot 63.5% from the floor and 45.8% from the stripe. Played 8.2 minutes per game total, and that includes those 6 total minutes for Brooklyn. He was on a 2-way contract with the Clippers, and then he was eventually waived, and then he signed 2 10-day deals with Brooklyn Nets. He played in Summer League for the Toronto Raptors, and then he signed a partially guaranteed deal. That included a signing bonus for signing and a deal for making the opening day roster, another $500,000, so $750,000 when he's on the roster on Monday. Partially guaranteed deal to join the Blazers, who he had initially signed with as an undrafted 2-way player some 4 seasons ago. So, Brown had, I thought he had an okay showing in their first preseason game against the New Zealand Breakers, and then against NBA competition, he looked bad. This was an unimpressive preseason, but he's 24, he's super young, he's played limited minutes, even at, he's played basically one real NBA season. His second year in the league, he played with OKC, played 60-some games and started a bunch of games. But other than that, he's been this fringe 2-way guy who is no longer eligible for a 2-way contract. This is an upside swing on a 7-foot 24-year-old. Let's talk best and worst case scenarios for both these guys, because I think both Rupert and Moses Brown are projects. And for the end of the bench, you kind of take upside swings and hope they work out. At least for a team like the Blazers, it makes sense to have the back half of your bench be like folks that maybe are not ready, but you hope they can be ready into the future. So the best case scenario for Rayan Rupert is that his defense, and he defends well off the ball, he defends off the ball, on the ball, he gets after it and guards, full length of the court. He pressures tightly in the half court against ball handlers. He can guard multiple positions with his length and his quickness. The best case scenario is that his defense eventually earns him a late in the season roster or rotation spot, and not when the Blazers have, kind of put the training wheels back on and are coasting towards losses at the end of the season, but when they're still trying to be vaguely competitive, even if they've lost a bunch of games. Rayan Rupert, best case scenario is that he's part of the plan as a wing defender because he grows with the remix and he grows on the practice court and he grows with skill work behind the scenes. On offense, he can't shoot, and his sort of in-between game just that he was supposedly had in some of the scouting reports I read just hasn't shown up. He's not an offensive player yet. And the best case scenario is that his defense gets him on the court and his offense has come a long way to keep him there. The worst case scenario is that he spends most of the year in the G League because he's just not an NBA player yet. And as someone who comes into the NBA as a teenager, he gets real useful seasoning, coaching from the Blazers coaching staff, coaching from the Rip City Remix coaching staff, refines his skills, and next year has a chance to sneak back into the rotation again in his second NBA season. The worst case scenario is that he spends year one watching and year one playing in the minor leagues. For Moses Brown, the best case scenario is that he is in a backup NBA center capable of playing 12 useful minutes as a rebounder, as a defender, and as a big body who can clog the paint in the Blazers' 2-3 zone that they love so much, and also as a somewhat useful defender in more traditional man-to-man looks. The best case scenario is that Brown is someone who you could say, okay, we need time. How about we give Mo a chance? The best case scenario is that by the end of the season, Moses Brown deserves playing time because of his size and his skills have caught up with him, and that you have depth at center that you otherwise haven't had in the Joe Cronin era. The best case scenario is that Moses Brown is an NBA player. The worst case scenario is that he's just not quite there yet. The sort of processing speed and the decision making and the touch on offense don't catch up, and that because he kind of has to think the game as opposed to play it instinctually, his physical tools, being big, having some good shot blocking timing occasionally, just never allow the hit to never show up because the processing speed can't catch up with the physical tools. The worst case scenario is that he is simply not an NBA player. Expectations for both these guys, I think they're on the outside of the rotation. Again, I think Rupert is going to spend a bunch of time in the G League. Brown, I would imagine he comes up and down between the G League. This value of having it in the same city, in the same part of the G League practice is going to practice at the Blazers PF. So if you want to assign Brown and Rupert to a G League practice, you can literally just fill out the paperwork and have them go out on the practice court and then call them back up. There's no rules to how many times you can transfer in between for those types of things. It's not like baseball where you get optioned between the minor leagues and there's some rules to it. The Blazers can just assign those guys, let them play. I think Rupert's going to play a bunch for the remix because he needs the seasoning. And I think Moses Brown will end up getting some playing time there too, because what he needs is just like to play a lot. I think Brown, because of his size, just not that many 7-footers who can run up and down an NBA court and defend and do all those things. Like, he's probably plays in the league for, maybe an even extended period of time. He's just not a positive contributor right now. He had a really, really rough end to his preseason run. And I think just like getting him out on the court, getting him accustomed to what the Blazers want to do via their G League team, because NBA teams just don't really practice that much. Once the season starts going, there'll be real value for having G League opportunities for these guys, having just skill work available for guys. I think there's going to be it'd be interesting to see how the Blazers approach it. But I think both of these guys are outside of the rotation looking in. I would assume Wainright and Kamara and Walker and Chris Murray are all well ahead of Rupert. And for Moses Brown, he's only going to play if there's an injury. But, I think there is enough injury concern about what's going on with Rob Williams that Brown could be a backup center often. It's just if the Blazers are fully healthy, these are best case scenarios within reason, worst case scenarios without injury. If the Blazers are healthy, Brown is on the outside looking in. If they're not healthy, he's going to have to play, and he's going to have to play a lot because they're just straight up going to need him. They're just going to need him because they don't have he's their third center, and they are going to need they can go small a little bit, but I don't think you want to rely on going small for big stretches. There's just too many teams that can beat you up on the glass and all those things. The Blazers are already going to be a tough rebounding team. I think really committing to going small will be, it's obviously an option there for them because Kamara and Walker can do that a little bit, but those guys would be overmatched against a lot of NBA centers, so it might have to be Moses Brown some of those times. Okay. That's everybody on the roster. Like I said, if you're a YouTube watcher, there's a playlist, season previews. It's got everybody. If you're an audio listener, go back and listen to everybody from Scoot and Ant and Tease and JG and DeAndre Ayton and Malcolm Brogdon and Rob Williams and Shaden Sharp. Everybody, we ran through everyone. Look at what they did last year, best and worst case scenarios, rolling expectations. Season's here. I'm excited. NBA basketball. We get to talk about the team playing basketball games that matter, or games that count. Matter might be an overstatement. Games that count. I'm super excited. That's Wednesday, the season opener against the Clippers. Let's just work backwards. Here's what we got shows coming up for the rest of the week. Wednesday morning, season preview with Darian from Locked On Clippers. We will have a crossover episode looking at that game as we typically do, a big season preview of the first game of the season. Tomorrow's show, bold predictions, my bold predictions for the season. Give you 5 bold predictions for the Blazers year. Thursday show, we will, as we jump around, not working backwards anymore. Thursday show, we'll talk about a basketball game. That will be pretty fun. And then we'll have a show on Friday for you too. 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts, also on YouTube. It's here and I'm not going anywhere. So tell your friends about the show. Come back and listen to more bold predictions tomorrow. Game 1 preview after that, and then we'll talk about the Blazers and the Scoot era beginning on Thursday's show. Going to be a whole bunch of fun. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.